Not legend, but routine. While the old tales speak of glittering silks and heroic merchants, the real road was a ribbon of dust, a handful of stale flatbread, and the patient sway of camel humps. Your nights were spent listening to the wind humming through ancient stone walls, your days to the clink of Song Dynasty copper cash and the occasional sigh of a cracked leather satchel. If a steady voice that paints the past in muted tones helps you ease into sleep, feel free to linger a while, like, share, or simply rest your eyes. Comments are welcome. Tell us where you first heard of the Silk Road, or whether you imagine the desert as a place of endless heat or quiet calm. Now let the soft glow of a campfire fade into the night, the sand cool beneath your feet, and step forward into the story of a caravan that moved slower than a dream. You lie still as the night releases its last breath, the darkness around you a thin veil that has not yet been torn by the sun. The courtyard of the caravanserai is a hollowed stone bowl, its walls breathing in the cool air and exhaling a faint mist that clings to the arches like a sigh. Dew has settled on the flagstones, each droplet a tiny mirror that catches the first hint of pale turquoise that will soon spill across the sky. The stone arches, ancient enough to have watched the rise of the Tang and the fall of the Uyghur kingdoms, are slick with that nighttime moisture, their surfaces smooth as the polished jade that merchants sometimes trade for silk. The scent of burnt goat fat lingers in the air, a tired sigh of the hearth that has fed travelers for generations. It is the smell of sustenance, and also the smell of a fire that has long since cooled, leaving only its memory to drift among the stones. Your pack rests at your feet, a leather chest that has traveled more roads than any single man could count. The leather is cracked in places, the grain worn down by countless journeys across the steppes, its hinges creaking in a rhythm that matches the old wooden door that leads out onto the market street. The door itself is a slab of pine, its surface scarred by the hands of countless travelers who have pushed it open at dawn and slammed it shut at night. When you lift it, the wood sighs, a low, resigned sound that seems to acknowledge the endless cycle of departure and return. The market street beyond is still a whisper, a thin line of shadows that will soon be filled with the clatter of carts and the low murmur of voices. A few murmurs already drift from the stalls, as if the city itself is testing its voice before the sun fully arrives. A merchant from the Karakhanid Khanate leans over a pile of cumin, his beard flecked with the dust of the road, his eyes sharp as the spices he weighs. He haggles with a tone that is both practiced and weary, the kind of negotiation that has been honed over generations of caravan trade. Across from him, a Tangut monk stands beside a low table, offering thin sheets of paper that have just begun to circulate in Kashgar after the Song court sent the first batches 15 years ago. The paper is still a novelty, its surface smooth and pale, a reminder that the world beyond the dunes is changing, even as the desert remains stubbornly the same. The monk's robes are a muted saffron, the color of old parchment, and his voice is soft, almost a chant, as he explains the virtues of the new writing material to a curious passerby. You move to the camels' tethering posts, the thick wooden beams that have held the animals steady for centuries. The ropes that bind the camels are frayed at the edges, their fibers worn thin by the weight of countless loads, yet they hold firm. You run your fingers along the cords, feeling the roughness of the hemp, the way the strands have been twisted together so tightly that even the slightest slip would be disastrous. These same ropes have pulled caravans across Central Asia since the 9th century, when the Silk Road first blossomed under the Tang's patronage. The thought of that long, unbroken line of trade, of silk, spices, paper, and ideas, makes the frayed cords feel like a living link to a past that is both distant and intimate. You straighten the ropes, tightening each knot with a practiced hand, the motions as familiar as the breath you take. The camels themselves stir, their massive bodies shifting against the sand-covered ground. Zafir, the lead camel, lifts his head and snorts, a low, resonant sound that seems to echo the sigh of the ancient caravansaries that once dotted this route. His eyes are half closed, the lids heavy with the weight of the night's rest, yet there is a spark of alertness that never fully fades. You run a hand along his flank, feeling the coarse wool of his coat, the way it catches the faint dew that has settled on the ground. The wool is warm, a natural blanket that has kept travelers insulated against the desert's cold nights for as long as anyone can remember. The camel's breath comes out in slow, measured puffs, each exhale a small cloud that disappears into the early morning air. You glance upward, and the sky is a pale wash of turquoise, a color that seems to have been diluted with water before being poured across the heavens. The light is gentle, not yet the harsh blaze that will later turn the dunes into a sea of molten gold. It is the kind of light that makes stone look soft, that turns the edges of the arches into rounded silhouettes, and that makes the dew on the ground glisten like a field of tiny pearls. You smile, thin-lipped, at the thought that the desert will soon swallow the city's bustle, that the wind will lift the sand and smooth the streets, that the noise of merchants and the clatter of carts will be muffled by the endless expanse of dunes. There is a quiet irony in the way the desert, indifferent and patient, will eventually erase the very activity that gives it purpose. You kneel beside the saddles, the leather seats that will soon bear the weight of the silk bolts you have yet to load. The leather is supple, darkened by years of use, its surface marked with the faint imprint of countless riders. You tighten the straps, pulling the buckles tight, the metal clicking against the leather with a sound that is both precise and reassuring. Each pull of the strap is a small promise, a whispered thanks to the silent stones that have held the caravanserai together for generations. The stones, cold and unmoving, have witnessed the rise of the Karakhanid Khanate, the spread of Islam, the arrival of Tangut monks, and the gradual shift of trade routes. They have absorbed the footsteps of soldiers, the prayers of monks, the laughter of children, and the sighs of weary travelers. To them, your gratitude is a quiet ripple in a long, still pond. A distant call to prayer drifts across the courtyard, a low, melodic chant that rises and falls like the tide. It is the voice of a muezzin perched on a minaret that has stood since the early days of Karakhanid rule, his words carried on the wind to reach every corner of the city. The call is a reminder that the world is changing, that Islam is spreading through the region, that the old ways are giving way to new customs. Yet the call does not disturb the calm. It blends with the morning air, becoming part of the tapestry of sounds that define this place. You listen, allowing the cadence of the prayer to settle in your chest, a gentle rhythm that matches the slow, steady beat of your own heart. The market street beyond the door begins to stir as the first merchants lift their shutters, the wooden panels creaking open to reveal stalls laden with spices, fabrics, and curiosities from lands far beyond the dunes. The air fills with the mingled aromas of cumin, dried figs, and the faint, sweet scent of incense that has been burned in the nearby mosque for generations. A child runs past, his feet kicking up a small cloud of dust that catches the morning light, turning it into a fleeting halo. The child's laughter is soft, almost a whisper, as if he knows that the desert does not tolerate loudness. He pauses to stare at a piece of silk that hangs from a stall, its colors shimmering like a river of moonlight, before darting away to chase a stray goat. You stand, feeling the weight of the leather chest at your side, the familiar pressure of the pack that will soon be loaded with bolts of silk from Guangzhou workshops, where mulberry leaves have fed silkworms for generations. The thought of those distant workshops, of the delicate hands that spin the cocoons into luminous threads, brings a quiet reverence. It also brings a subtle irony. The silk you carry is a product of meticulous care and refined artistry, yet it will travel across a landscape that is harsh, indifferent, and unyielding. The juxtaposition of softness and severity is a reminder of the balance that defines the Silk Road itself. You take a final breath, inhaling the cool, damp air that carries the scent of stone, goat fat, and distant incense. The courtyard with its stone arches, dew-slicked floor, and quiet murmurs feels like a sanctuary that has been waiting for you to awaken. The calm of the space settles around you like a warm blanket, its threads woven from centuries of trade, prayer, and perseverance. You feel the steady rhythm of your own breathing align with the slow, patient pulse of the desert beyond, and in that alignment, you find a quiet steadiness that will carry you through the miles ahead. The day has begun, and the stones, the camels, the market, and the distant dunes all await your next step, each a silent companion in the long, measured journey ahead. The sun climbs higher, spilling a thin gold across the market square, until the shadows of the stone arches melt into a single, warm wash. Light catches the dust that has settled on the cobbles, turning each grain into a tiny, trembling ember. You move among the piles of silk, as if walking through a forest of muted colors, each bolt a whisper of distant Guangzhou workshops where mulberry leaves have fed silkworms for generations. The cloth hangs in long, rippling folds, the sheen of the fabric catching the light like a calm river caught in a fleeting breeze. The seller, a plump man whose jaw bears the faint crack of a lifetime of chewing tough meat, folds each piece with a precision that recalls the measured strokes of a calligrapher. His hands, though calloused, remember the brushwork he once practiced under the influence of the Liao dynasty, the same careful pressure that now guides the silk into neat, stacked bundles. You watch the way his fingers tuck the edges, the way the silk sighs as it settles into its place, and you feel a quiet kinship with the rhythm of his motions. The market hums around you, soft barters, the clink of copper coins, the occasional laugh that rolls like a distant drum, yet the space you occupy remains a pocket of stillness, a place where the world narrows to the feel of fabric against skin. You reach for the first bolt, its length a familiar weight in your arms. The rope that secures it to the camel's belly is frayed at the ends, the fibers worn smooth by countless journeys across the steppe. The same cords have pulled caravans across Central Asia since the 9th century, their history a silent thread that binds you to the countless travelers who have come before. You run a thumb along the rope, feeling the unevenness of the twist, the way the fibers have been knotted and reknotted, each knot a small promise of endurance. The rope sighs under your touch, a low, resigned sound that seems to echo the desert's own patient patience. The camel, Zafir, shifts his massive weight against the packed sand, his breath a slow, measured puff that rises and fades in the warm air. His flank bears the coarse wool of the pack, a texture that presses against the animal's skin like a second, softer hide. You press the bolt against his side, feeling the give of his flesh beneath the wool, the way the animal's muscles flex in response. The camel's eyes, dark and unblinking, watch the activity with a detached curiosity, as if he knows the importance of the cargo, but remains indifferent to the human concerns that surround it. A young apprentice, eager and clumsy, trips over a stray bundle of barley, sending a few grains scattering across the stone. The camel snorts, a short, amused sound that seems to say, "Another day, another crumb," and you smile at the small absurdity of the moment. The apprentice scrambles to gather the spilled barley, his hands trembling slightly, his face flushed with the heat of the sun and the embarrassment of his stumble. You pause, wiping a thin line of sand from your eyes with the back of your hand. The grit clings to the skin of your lashes, a reminder that the desert is never far, even when you stand among bustling stalls. The sand has already begun to settle on your lips, a fine, dry film that tastes faintly of earth and distant dunes. You press a finger to your mouth, feeling the grit, and let it dissolve into the quiet of the morning. The sensation is oddly comforting, a small, tactile reminder that you are still part of the world you travel through, not merely a carrier of goods. The process of loading the silk becomes a ritual, each movement deliberate, each breath measured. You lift a bolt, its length stretching out like a river of color, and guide it onto the camel's back. The silk slides over the animal's flank, the smoothness of the fabric contrasting with the roughness of the wool beneath. You hear the faint rustle of the cloth as it settles, a soft susurrus that blends with the distant clatter of metal tools and the occasional call of a hawk circling above. The hawk's cry is sharp, cutting through the air, yet it feels distant, as if it belongs to another world, one where the sky is endless and the ground is a mere suggestion. A merchant from the Karakhanid Khanate, his turban wrapped tightly around his head, watches the loading with a practiced eye. He nods approvingly, his beard dusted with the same fine sand that clings to your own beard, his voice low as he comments on the quality of the silk. "Fine threads," he says, his tone dry, as smooth as the river that never freezes. There is a hint of irony in his words, a quiet acknowledgement that the silk, though delicate, must endure the harshness of the desert just as the river endures the seasons. You return his nod, feeling the weight of his observation settle like a stone in a pond, creating ripples that spread outward, touching the edges of your thoughts. The market sounds begin to soften as the sun climbs higher, the heat pressing down on the stone arches and turning the air into a thin veil of warmth. The scent of burnt goat fat, lingering from the night's fire, mingles with the aroma of spices, cumin, coriander, a faint hint of cardamom, creating a tapestry of smells that is both comforting and slightly oppressive. You inhale deeply, letting the mixture fill your lungs, and exhale slowly, feeling the breath steady your pulse. The rhythm of your breathing matches the gentle sway of the camel's steps, a slow, unhurried cadence that seems to synchronize the world around you. A small child, no older than 7, darts between the stalls, his bare feet slapping against the hot stone. He pauses to stare at a bolt of silk, his eyes wide with wonder, the colors reflecting in his pupils like tiny pools of water. He reaches out, his small hand hovering just above the fabric, then pulls back, as if the silk were a living thing that might slip away. You watch him for a moment, the innocence of his curiosity a stark contrast to the seasoned traders who have learned to mask their hopes behind practiced smiles. The child's mother calls him away, her voice soft but firm, and he disappears into the crowd, leaving behind a faint echo of laughter that fades into the background hum. You continue to load, your hands moving with a practiced ease that comes from years of travel. The bolts of silk stack neatly against each other, forming a wall of color that will soon be carried across the dunes, across the endless steppe, toward distant markets where they will be transformed into garments, banners, and tapestries. Each bolt carries a story of weavers in Suzhou who have tended their looms for generations, of merchants who have bargained in the bustling streets of Guangzhou, of the Song court that once prized these fabrics as symbols of wealth and refinement. The stories are silent now, but they linger in the fibers, waiting to be told anew. A sudden gust of wind lifts a few stray strands of silk, causing them to flutter like moths caught in a lantern's light. They dance briefly in the air before settling back onto the ground, their movement a fleeting reminder of the fragility of the cargo. You bend to gather them, your fingers brushing the soft material, and you feel a brief shiver of connection, a momentary bridge between the distant workshops and your present reality. The wind carries with it a faint scent of distant water, a whisper of the hidden lakes that lie far beyond the dunes, a promise that the desert, though harsh, holds within it the seeds of life. The camel's breathing steadies, his shoulders relaxing as the load becomes balanced. He lets out a low, contented hum, a sound that seems to echo the ancient caravansaries that once dotted the route, their walls still holding the faint scent of incense and the echo of prayers whispered by monks centuries before. The hum is a soft reminder that you are not alone in this journey. You are part of a long line of travelers, each carrying their own burdens, each moving forward with a quiet determination. You step back, surveying the completed load. The bolts of silk lie in orderly rows, their colors ranging from deep indigo to soft ivory, each hue a silent testament to the skill of the weavers who spun them. The camel, now fully burdened, stands patient, his eyes reflecting the sky's pale turquoise. The market around you continues its gentle bustle, the murmurs of merchants, the clink of coins, the occasional laugh, each sound a thread in the tapestry of the day. You take a moment to breathe, inhaling the warm air, feeling the sun's heat on your skin, hearing the distant call of a hawk, feeling the steady rhythm of the camel's breath. The world feels expansive yet intimate, a vast desert horizon contained within the confines of a stone courtyard. The calm settles around you like a warm blanket, the kind that has been woven from countless nights under the stars, from countless steps across endless dunes. With the silk finally secured, you turn toward the caravan's line, ready to join the others in the next phase of the journey. The road ahead stretches out, a pale ribbon bordered by dunes that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, from the Tang to the then ruling Karakhanid. Yet for now, in this moment, the only thing that matters is the quiet satisfaction of a task completed, the soft hum of the camel, and the gentle, steady breath that steadies your thoughts. The day continues, and you move forward, each step a muted drumbeat that lulls. You step beyond the mud-brick ramparts of Kashgar, the heavy wooden gate sighing shut behind you as if it, too, were weary of the day's first light. The courtyard's stone tiles give way to a compact track of compacted earth, the surface still bearing the faint imprint of countless hooves and cart wheels that have pressed forward here since the Tang caravans first traced these routes. A thin veil of sand clings to the air, catching the pale turquoise of the sky and turning it into a soft, diffused wash that seems to mute the world's sharper edges. The city's clamor recedes, swallowed by a curtain of shifting dunes that rise and fall like the slow breath of a sleeping beast. You feel the weight of the caravan's silence settle on your shoulders, a quiet that is both a relief and a reminder of the distance you have just put between yourself and the familiar bustle. Your camel, Zafir, shifts his massive frame against the reins, the leather creaking in a rhythm that matches the faint rustle of sand across the dunes. His breath is a low, steady puff, each exhale a thin plume that disappears into the morning light. The animal's name, given by a previous trader who thought the desert's heat would turn any beast into a victor of the sun, feels oddly appropriate now. Zafir carries the load with a dignity that borders on the ceremonial. You run a hand along the worn rope, feeling the frayed fibers that have survived countless journeys across Central Asia, their edges softened by the passage of time, yet still strong enough to hold the weight of silk, spices, and the hopes of merchants who trust their fortunes to the road. A small brass coin glints in the thin light that filters through the dunes, its round face stamped with the unmistakable characters of the Song dynasty. You lift it, turning it over in your palm, and notice the fine patina that has settled over the metal, a testament to the many hands that have handled it before yours. The coin is a quiet token of the far-off markets you will eventually reach, a reminder that the silk you bear began its life in the workshops of Guangzhou, where mulberry leaves fed silkworms for generations. The thought of those distant workshops brings a faint smile to your lips. The world feels both immense and intimately connected by these small, circulating objects. A lone figure appears on the horizon, a silhouette against the pale dunes, moving with the measured gait of someone accustomed to the desert's endless expanse. The traveler's robe flutters like a faded banner, its fabric worn thin at the cuffs, the hem dusted with the same sand that clings to your own boots. He raises a hand in a silent greeting, a gesture that carries the weight of centuries of unspoken etiquette among desert nomads. You return the greeting with a slight nod, the motion almost automatic, as if you have performed it 1,000 times in the same place. The exchange is brief, but it anchors you to the present, a small human connection amid the vast, indifferent landscape. The road ahead stretches like a pale ribbon, its edges blurred by the soft undulations of the dunes. Each rise and fall seems to echo the rise and fall of empires that have claimed these sands as their own: Tang, Karakhanid, later Seljuk. Yet the desert remains indifferent to the banners that flutter above it. The wind carries a faint scent of salt, a subtle reminder of the hidden lakes that lie deep within the Taklamakan, their waters guarded jealously by the very dunes that conceal them. The scent is faint, almost a memory, but it sharpens your awareness of the desert's paradox, a place of both scarcity and hidden abundance, where water is the most guarded secret, and yet can be found if one knows where to look. You glance down at Zafir's harness, the leather straps darkened by sun and sweat, the metal buckles dulled by the passage of countless suns. The animal's ears flick at a distant rustle, perhaps a desert lark or a stray wind that has found a voice. You feel a quiet kinship with the camel. Both of you are burdened, both of you move forward, both of you are part of a chain that stretches far beyond the immediate horizon. The camel's low hum, a sound that seems to echo the sigh of ancient caravansaries that once dotted this route, reverberates through the stillness, a subtle drumbeat that steadies the heart. The sky above begins to shift, the turquoise deepening into a softer, more muted blue as the sun climbs higher. Light filters through the fine grains of sand, creating a gentle, diffused glow that softens the harsh edges of the dunes. Shadows lengthen and contract in a slow, predictable rhythm, as if the desert itself were breathing in time with your steps. You find yourself matching that rhythm, your breath syncing with the rise and fall of the wind, the sway of Zaphir's gait, the distant call of a bird that seems to be perched somewhere beyond sight. A faint murmur reaches your ears, the distant echo of a caravan that has passed this way perhaps weeks ago, its voices now carried on the wind like a memory. You imagine the traders, their faces weathered by sun and sand, their voices low as they negotiated the price of silk, spices, and precious stones. Their words are lost now, but the cadence of their trade lingers, a subtle undercurrent to the present silence. You think of the merchant from the Karakanid Khanate who haggled over cumin in the market square of Kashgar, his voice a low baritone that rose and fell like the dunes themselves. The memory is a quiet reminder that commerce is a thread that weaves together disparate peoples across vast distances, binding them in a shared, if often unspoken, purpose. The path bends slightly, following the natural contour of the land, leading you toward a low rise that offers a brief overlook. You pause, allowing Zafir to rest his weight, and you lean against a weathered wooden post that has stood here for generations. Its surface is carved with faint, eroded symbols, remnants of Brahmi script left by Buddhist pilgrims who once trekked these routes in search of enlightenment. The carvings are half eroded, the lines softened by wind and sand, yet they still hint at a time when the desert was a conduit for ideas as much as for goods. You trace the faint grooves with a fingertip, feeling the coolness of the wood beneath your skin, and you sense a quiet continuity, a line that runs from those ancient travelers to the present moment. A subtle irony settles in the back of your mind as you consider the vastness of the desert and the smallness of the coin in your hand. Here, amidst endless dunes that have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, a single piece of metal can represent the weight of an entire economy, the hopes of a merchant, the promise of silk that will soon be woven into garments far from its origin. The coin's surface is smooth, its edges worn, yet it carries the imprint of an empire that, in its time, was known for its cultural flourishing and technological advances. The juxtaposition of such a refined object against the raw, indifferent expanse of sand feels almost like a quiet joke the world has played on itself, refinement and brutality existing side by side, each giving meaning to the other. You rise, feeling the sand shift beneath your boots, each step leaving a shallow imprint that will soon be erased by the next gust of wind. The desert's silence is not empty. It is filled with the soft sounds of your own breathing, the gentle creak of the rains, the distant whisper of sand moving across stone. The journey ahead is long, but the steady clip-clop of Zafir's hooves creates a rhythm that steadies your thoughts, as if each step were a muted drumbeat lulling you toward a quiet resolve. You think of the countless caravans that have traveled this same path, each one adding its own layer to the tapestry of history, each one a thread in the larger fabric of the Silk Road. The sun climbs higher still, its heat a gentle pressure against your skin, not harsh but persistent, like a reminder that the desert does not rush, it simply exists. You adjust the strap of your leather chest, feeling the familiar creak of its hinges, the worn leather softened by years of use. The pack sits at your feet, its contents shifting slightly with each movement, the silk bolts inside rustling softly, a sound that reminds you of distant rivers in far-off lands where the threads were first spun. You pause for a moment, allowing the heat to settle into your bones, and you let the quiet of the desert settle around you like a warm blanket, comforting in its constancy. A distant silhouette appears on the horizon, a caravan of nomads, their camels silhouetted against the brightening sky, their banners fluttering like pale flags. They move with a measured pace, their presence a reminder that you are not alone in this vastness, that the desert is a shared space, a corridor through which many lives pass. Their leader raises a hand in a greeting, a gesture as old as the dunes themselves, and you return it with a slow, deliberate nod. The exchange is brief, but it carries the weight of mutual respect, an unspoken acknowledgement that each traveler is a part of a larger, ever-moving whole. The road ahead continues, a pale ribbon that seems to stretch into eternity, bordered on either side by dunes that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, from the Tang to the then ruling Karakanid. The wind carries a faint scent of salt from the distant Taklamakan's hidden lakes, a reminder that water is the desert's most guarded secret. Your camel, named Zafir, shifts his weight and lets out a low hum, a sound that seems to echo the sigh of the ancient caravansaries that once dotted the route. You glance at the small brass coin minted under the Song dynasty, its round face a reminder of the far-off markets you will eventually reach. A distant figure, perhaps a Bedouin trader, raises a hand in a silent greeting, his robe fluttering like a faded banner. The road feels long, but the steady clip-clop of hooves creates a rhythm that steadies the heart, as if each step were a muted drumbeat lulling you toward rest. The calm of the desert settles around you, a gentle, unhurried companion that walks beside you, inviting you to breathe in its quiet and let the journey. The fire has settled into a low, steady murmur, the kind of sound that seems to breathe with the desert night itself. You spread the thin goatskin blanket over the sand, feeling the roughness of the hide against your fingertips, a reminder that the road you travel is made of many small compromises. The skin is damp where the night's chill has gathered, and the faint scent of burnt goat fat lingers in the air, a tired sigh that has followed you from the courtyard of Kashgar to this isolated spot where the dunes roll like silent waves. Above you, the sky is an ink-black canvas, unspooled and endless. Stars pierce the darkness in a pattern that has guided caravans for centuries, their cold light indifferent to the worries of mortals below. You can almost hear the faint echo of an ancient astronomer's calculations, the same calculations that once marked the routes of silk and spice, now reduced to a quiet hum that blends with the crackle of the fire. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens, a milky river that seems to flow in the opposite direction of your journey, as if reminding you that the world is larger than the path you tread. The fire's orange tongues lick the air, sending up a few sparks that drift upward before vanishing into the night. Each spark is a tiny, fleeting whisper, a momentary flare of light that mirrors the brief glints of silk you carry in the camel's belly. You watch them rise, feeling a strange kinship with their brief existence. They are bright, they are seen, and then they are gone, leaving only the soft glow of the embers behind. The fire's heat is modest, enough to warm the thin blanket around your shoulders, but not enough to chase away the chill that settles into your bones when the wind sighs across the dunes. Beside you, a fellow trader from Bukhara sits on a low stone slab, his beard dusted with the fine, pale sand that the desert seems to sprinkle on everything it touches. He is a man of few words, his eyes reflecting the fire's light like polished amber. Between you, a simple broth of lentils and dried figs simmers in a battered copper pot, the surface rippling gently as the fire's breath stirs it. The broth is thin, almost watery, but the addition of cumin, still fragrant after a long journey, gives it a fleeting warmth that spreads through your chest like a quiet promise. You stir the broth with a wooden spoon, the wood worn smooth by countless meals shared on the road. The spoon makes a soft, rhythmic clink against the pot, a sound that blends with the distant howl of a desert fox. The fox's cry is low and mournful, a reminder that life persists here in forms that are both wild and resilient. The animal moves through the dunes with a grace that seems at odds with the harshness of its environment, its pale coat blending into the night as if it were part of the very sand itself. You watch the fox for a moment, noting how its eyes catch the firelight, then turn away, disappearing into the shadows as silently as a thought. The broth is ladled into two shallow bowls, the metal still warm to the touch. You take a sip, feeling the earthy flavor of lentils mingle with the sweet chew of figs, the cumin adding a sharp edge that cuts through the blandness of the desert night. The taste is modest, almost austere, but it carries with it the memory of distant markets where spices are bartered like precious stones. You think of the bustling stalls of Kashgar, the merchant haggling over cumin, the Tangut monk offering thin sheets of paper, novelties that seemed exotic then, now merely fragments of a past that feels both distant and immediate. Your companion from Bukhara lifts his bowl in a quiet toast, his eyes meeting yours for a brief instant before returning to the fire. He does not speak, his smile is enough. There is a subtle irony in the way you both share this simple meal, while the silk you transport is a luxury that will soon be draped over the shoulders of the elite in far-off courts. The contrast between the humble broth and the luminous bolts of silk is a quiet joke that the desert seems to whisper. Wealth and poverty travel side by side, bound together by the same camel's rope. You glance at Zafir, your camel, now settled a short distance away, its head tucked low as it chews on a handful of dried barley. The animal's breath is slow, each exhale a soft puff that rises and fades in the cool night air. Zafir's eyes are half closed, his ears flicking occasionally at the distant sounds of the desert, perhaps the rustle of a sand-filled shrub or the faint creak of a distant caravan's wheels. The camel's presence is a steady anchor, a reminder that the journey is not yours alone. It is shared with a creature that has known the dunes longer than any human memory. The night deepens, and the wind begins to stir, a gentle sigh that brushes across the sand, lifting fine grains that settle like a soft veil over the fire. The wind carries with it a faint scent of salt, a reminder of the hidden lakes that lie far beneath the Taklamakan's surface, their waters guarded jealously by the desert itself. You inhale the cool air, feeling it fill your lungs, and notice how the breath seems to settle a little more evenly, as if the desert itself is exhaling in time with you. You reach into your pack and pull out the small brass coin minted under the Song dynasty, its round face catching a flicker of firelight. The coin is warm from the day's travel, its surface bearing the faint imprint of a dragon's head, a symbol of an empire that stretches far beyond the dunes you now cross. You turn it over in your hand, the metal cool against your skin, and let the light play across its surface. The coin is a tangible link between the bustling markets of Guangzhou, where mulberry leaves fed silkworms for generations, and this isolated spot where only the stars and the fire bear witness to your passage. A distant howl rises again, this time softer, more mournful, as if the desert itself is singing a lullaby. The fox's cry seems to echo the rhythm of your own heartbeat, a low thrum that matches the steady beat of the fire's crackle. You feel a quiet kinship with the animal, both of you travelers in a landscape that offers little comfort but much solitude. The desert's vastness presses in around you, yet the fire's glow creates a small island of warmth, a pocket of safety where thoughts can settle like dust on a still surface. You lean back against the goatskin blanket, the roughness of the hide pressing into your back, grounding you. The blanket's edges are frayed, the stitches worn thin from years of use, each thread a story of previous journeys, of merchants who have lain beneath the same stars. You think of the countless caravans that have passed this way, their camels' hooves leaving shallow imprints that are quickly erased by the wind, their voices now only whispers in the dunes. The desert does not keep records. It only remembers through the patterns it repeats, the cycles of wind and sand, the rise and fall of dunes that seem eternal. The broth in your bowl is nearly finished, the last few drops clinging to the sides of the metal. You set the bowl down with a soft clink, the sound barely audible over the fire's whisper. The empty bowl reflects the firelight, a small dark mirror that captures the flickering flames. You notice how the bowl's interior is stained with a faint amber hue, a lingering reminder of the figs that once floated in the broth. The simple act of drinking, of sharing a meal, feels like a ritual, a quiet acknowledgement of the humanity that persists even in the most barren of places. Your companion from Bukhara reaches for his own bowl, his fingers brushing the cool metal, and offers you a small piece of dried date, its skin wrinkled like the palms of an old trader's hands. The date is sweet, its flavor concentrated, a brief burst of richness that contrasts with the thin broth. You bite into it slowly, feeling the sugar dissolve on your tongue, and smile faintly at the irony that even in a desert, sweetness can be found, whether in fruit, in friendship, or in the soft glow of a fire. The night stretches on, the stars moving imperceptibly across the heavens, their positions shifting as if the universe itself is turning a page. You feel the weight of the silence settle around you, a soft blanket that presses gently against your thoughts. The desert's quiet is not empty, it is filled with the low hum of distant dunes, the occasional rustle of a nocturnal creature, the faint creak of a camel's harness. It is a soundscape that invites contemplation, that allows the mind to wander without the urgency of daylight. You think of the road ahead, of the next sunrise that will bring a new heat, a new set of challenges. The desert will once again become a furnace, the sand will once more rise in waves, and the caravan will move forward, its camels' steps a metronome that keeps time with the heartbeats of those who travel. Yet for now, in this moment, you are anchored by the fire, by the broth, by the quiet companionship of a fellow trader, and by the steady presence of Zafir, whose breathing is a soft rhythm that matches the pulse of the night. A soft rustle comes from the edge of the firelight, a small nocturnal bird, perhaps a sand grouse, its feathers ruffling as it settles on a nearby rock. It makes a faint coo, a sound that seems to echo the distant chant of monks who once recited prayers in the monasteries that dotted these routes centuries ago. The bird's presence is a gentle reminder that life persists in many forms, each adapting to the harshness of the environment in its own quiet way. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the cool desert air, feeling the faint taste of cumin linger on your palate, the faint scent of goat fat still present but softened by the night's breeze. The fire's glow paints soft shadows on the sand, the light dancing like a slow, patient waltz. In this stillness, you sense a calm that is not the absence of movement, but the presence of a deeper rhythm, a rhythm that has guided caravans across the Silk Road for centuries, a rhythm that now carries you forward, step by measured step. the night continues its slow, unhurried passage, and you remain there, wrapped in the goatskin blanket, the fire's warmth a quiet companion, the stars above a timeless audience. The desert, with all its vastness and silence, feels less like an empty expanse and more like a gentle, patient host, offering you a space to breathe, to reflect, to simply be. You let the quiet settle around you, a soft, soothing tide that eases the weariness of the day, and allow the night. The sun hangs high, a relentless eye that watches the dunes turn to molten gold. A thin line of heat shimmers on the horizon, and you feel the air thicken, as if the world itself were drawing a breath before a sigh. From the distance, a low, muffled roar begins to gather, a sound that does not belong to any animal you have known on these routes. It is the sandstorm, the ancient breath of the desert, rising like a curtain that will soon swallow the sky. You tighten the reins with fingers that have grown calloused from years of guiding Zafir through countless passes. The leather bites into your palm, a familiar pressure that steadies the mind. The rope, frayed at the edges, sings a quiet note against the wind, a reminder that even the strongest cords can be worn thin by time. You glance at the caravan ahead. The camels lower their heads, their ears flicking at the first grains of sand that begin to drift like pale ash. The storm arrives in a sudden surge, a wall of golden dust that rolls forward with the inevitability of a tide. The world blurs, the outlines of the dunes dissolve into a single, indistinguishable shade. The sun, once a bright overseer, is now a dim halo behind a veil of grit. You can taste the sand on your tongue, a dry, metallic tang that makes you think of the iron tools once used by Seljuk soldiers to carve their names into stone. The irony is not lost on you. Those same swords that clanged in distant courts now echo in the hiss of wind against your skin. Zafir's breath becomes shallow, each inhalation a struggle against the fine particles that invade his nostrils. His eyes, usually bright with the patience of a seasoned traveler, flutter like moths caught in a lantern's glow. You whisper a quiet prayer, the words slipping out in a language that has been spoken by caravan masters for generations, a blend of old Turkic reverence and the newer cadence of Islam that now threads through the Karakhanid elite. The prayer is simple, a request for protection, not from the storm itself, but from the weariness that follows such trials. You lean against a weathered wooden post that stands alone in the shifting sea of sand. Its surface is carved with ancient Brahmi inscriptions, the remnants of a Buddhist pilgrimage route that once linked the highlands of the Himalayas to the lowlands of the Tarim Basin. The characters are worn, their edges softened by centuries of wind and sand, yet they still hold a quiet dignity. You trace one of the loops with a fingertip, feeling the grooves as if they might tell a story. The irony of a stone bearing the marks of monks while you pray in a different faith is a soft smile that passes through you, unnoticed by the storm but present in the stillness of your thoughts. The wind howls, a chorus of voices that seem to belong to no living creature. It lashes at the camel's face, sending sand into his nostrils like tiny, relentless spears. Zafir snorts, a low, resigned sound that blends with the roar of the storm. You feel the rawness of the rope against your hands, the skin of your forearms reddened by the friction. The sand, fine as powdered bone, settles into the creases of your clothing, coating the wool of your pack like a second skin. You notice how the desert never truly forgets. It simply reshapes itself, covering the past in a fresh layer of white. Moment passes, and the storm seems to pause, as if listening to its own fury. The silence that follows is not empty. It is a heavy, expectant hush that presses against your ears. The dunes, now a smooth expanse of white, glisten under the sun that has reclaimed its place behind the veil. The light is blinding, yet softened by the fine dust that still lingers in the air, turning the world into a muted watercolor. You rise from the post, feeling the weight of the sand in every step. The caravan members begin to move, their silhouettes emerging like ghosts from the storm's veil. You help Zafir shake off the excess grit, his coat shedding grains that fall like tiny, silent rain. The camel's eyes clear, and he lifts his head, a small, dignified gesture that suggests he is ready to continue. The reins feel steadier now, the rope less abrasive against your skin, as if the storm has polished both the metal and your resolve. You take a moment to clean the sand from your clothes, brushing it away with a rough piece of fabric torn from your pack. The sand clings stubbornly to the seams, a reminder that the desert's memory is persistent. You glance at the brass song coin you keep tucked in your pocket, its surface still catching the sun's rays despite the storm's attempt to dull it. The coin feels warm, a small, tangible link to the distant markets of Guangzhou, where silk once flowed like water and merchants bartered with the same quiet determination you now carry across the dunes. The caravan resumes its march, the camels' hooves leaving shallow imprints that will be erased by the next gust. The rhythm of their steps is a metronome, a steady beat that steadies your heart. The sand beneath your boots feels softer now, a fine powder that yields gently with each footfall. You notice a faint, almost imperceptible scent of wet earth, as if the storm had briefly touched the ground before retreating, leaving behind a promise of moisture that the desert rarely grants. As the sun climbs higher, the heat begins to soften the remaining dust, turning the white landscape into a pale, shimmering sea. The sky clears, revealing a brilliant blue that stretches endlessly, unmarred by clouds. The storm has passed, leaving behind a pristine expanse that sparkles under the sun like a field of sugar, each grain catching the light in a quiet celebration of its own existence. You pause, breathing in the dry, clean air, feeling the calm return to the desert as gently as a sigh after a long exhale. The silence that follows the storm feels comforting, a soft blanket that settles over the dunes, inviting you to rest, if only for a moment, before the road calls you onward. The desert's breath steady. The heat of the road has been a steady press against your back, a weight that has settled into the muscles of your shoulders, as inevitably as the sand settles into the creases of your cloak. When the horizon finally yields a thin green line, it does so with the quiet modesty of a sigh, not the triumphant flare of a city gate. The oasis near Kuqa appears as a narrow ribbon of shade, a thin breath of palm fronds that bend gently in a wind that carries the faint scent of distant water. It is not a grand garden, nor a lavish court. It is a place where the desert, after weeks of relentless sun, pauses long enough to offer a sip of mercy. You guide Zafir toward the shallow pool that gathers at the foot of a low, earthen wall. The water is cool to the touch, a liquid that seems to retain a memory of the mountains that feed it, a memory that is reflected in the way the surface shivers under the light of a sun that has begun to turn amber. When your hand dips into the pool, the water clings to your skin like a thin veil, and a small ripple spreads outward, disturbing the stillness that the oasis has cultivated. The ripple is a reminder that even the most tranquil places are never completely untouched by the world beyond. Around the pool, stone cups sit on a low ledge, each one a simple vessel of glazed earthenware, their surfaces mottled with the faint brown of years of use. You fill them, the water slipping into the cups with a soft, sighing sound, as if the oasis itself is breathing. The sound is a quiet counterpoint to the distant clatter of camel hooves that have paused for the moment, their shadows stretching lazily across the sand. You raise the cup to your lips, and the water tastes of mineral and memory, a faint metallic tang that recalls the copper of the caravan coins you have collected, the brass song coin that still catches the sun's light in your pocket. The taste lingers, a reminder that the journey is a series of small exchanges: water for thirst, coin for trust, silk for hope. An older woman steps forward from behind a cluster of date palms. Her hands are weathered, the skin creased like the bark of the trees she tends, and her eyes hold a quiet steadiness that has been forged by countless caravans passing through this spot. She offers you a handful of dates, their skins dark and glossy, their flesh soft and sweet. You take one, feeling the slight resistance of the skin before it yields, releasing a fragrant, honeyed scent that seems to fill the air around you. The dates are a simple pleasure, yet they carry the weight of the oasis's generosity, a generosity that has been extended to travelers for generations. Long before the caravan banners fluttered over the steppe, the oasis is not only a place of water and fruit. It is also a point where cultures intersect, where the call to prayer mingles with the soft chants of Buddhist monks that still echo from the cliffs beyond. A modest mosque stands near the edge of the pool, its brick arches low and unadorned, the mortar softened by the passage of time. The mosque's roof is a simple slab of baked clay, its surface cracked in places where the sun has baked it for centuries. Inside, a few worshippers kneel on woven mats, their heads bowed, their breaths moving in a rhythm that matches the gentle lapping of water against stone. The call to prayer, when it rises, is a low, resonant tone that seems to blend with the wind, creating a soundscape that is both solemn and comforting. You notice that a few Buddhist monks have also taken refuge at the oasis. Their saffron robes a bright contrast against the muted greens of the palms. Their chants are faint, a soft murmur that drifts on the breeze, a reminder that the Silk Road has always been a conduit for ideas as much as for goods. The monk's presence does not clash with the mosque. Instead, it creates a quiet tapestry of belief, each thread woven into the same fabric of survival. The oasis, in its understated way, becomes a microcosm of the larger world you are traversing, a place where faiths coexist, where trade routes become pathways of understanding. Children dart between the date palms, their laughter a bright, fleeting sound that cuts through the stillness like a sudden flash of light. Their feet kick up small clouds of dust that settle quickly, as if the desert itself is impatient to return to its quiet state. They chase each other in games that are simple and timeless: tag, hide and seek among the trunks, a race to see who can climb the highest branch. Their faces are sun-kissed, their eyes bright with curiosity, and they pause occasionally to stare at the travelers, as if measuring the distance between their world and yours with a silent curiosity. Their presence is a reminder that life continues, even in places where the landscape seems barren. You sit on a low stone wall that borders the pool, the stone cool beneath your palm, its surface worn smooth by the countless hands that have rested upon it over the years. The wall is dotted with small niches, each one once holding a lantern or a small offering. Now, a few of them hold simple clay pots, their contents a mixture of water, dates, and the occasional piece of dried fruit. The wall, like the oasis itself, bears the marks of time, cracks that have widened with each season, lichen that clings to its base, a faint graffiti of a traveler's name etched in a language you cannot read. It is a quiet testament to the passage of countless journeys, each one leaving a faint imprint before moving on. You take a moment to polish the brass song coin you have kept in your satchel. The coin, minted 15 years earlier in the Song Court, has traveled with you across mountains and deserts, its surface dulled by sand and sun. You rub it gently with a strip of cloth, and the light catches the raised characters, casting a brief glint that seems to echo the distant lanterns of Dunhuang you will soon see. The act of polishing is a small ritual, a way to acknowledge the continuity of your path, to honor the objects that have accompanied you, and to remind yourself that even the smallest metal disc can carry a story as vast as the steppe. The oasis supplies you with fresh water to refill your leather skin, the leather softening slightly as it absorbs the cool liquid. You feel the weight of the pack shift, the silk inside settling into a more comfortable position against your back. The silk, still wrapped in its protective cloth, is a silent promise of wealth and exchange, a promise that will be fulfilled when you reach the markets of Dunhuang. The weight of the silk is now balanced by the lightness of the oasis, a paradox that feels almost poetic. The heavier the cargo, the more necessary the gentle breeze rustles the fronds of the palms, sending a soft rustling sound that resembles the whisper of pages in a book. The sound is a reminder of the manuscripts that travel along the same routes, the knowledge that moves as silently as the sand. You think of the thin sheets of paper offered by a Tangut monk in Kashgar, still a novelty 15 years prior, and wonder how many of those sheets have found their way into the hands of scholars in the libraries of Dunhuang. The oasis, in its quiet way, becomes a place where the past and the present intersect, where the scent of dates and the taste of water mingle with the faint aroma of ink and parchment that lingers in the air. The sun begins its slow descent, turning the sky from a harsh, bright blue to a softer, amber hue. Shadows lengthen, stretching across the sand and pooling around the oasis's edge. The temperature drops just enough to make the air feel crisp, a gentle contrast to the heat that has dominated the day. You feel a calm that settles into your bones, a feeling that the desert, despite its vastness, can be held in a single moment of stillness. The oasis, with its water, its dates, its prayers, and its children's laughter, offers a brief sanctuary, a place where the journey can be paused without losing its direction. You rise from the stone wall, feeling the coolness of the stone linger on your skin. You adjust the straps of your pack, ensuring that the silk remains secure, and you give a quiet nod to the older woman who offered the dates. She returns the gesture with a smile that is both weary and warm, a smile that has greeted countless travelers over the years. You take one last sip from your cup, feeling the water slide down your throat, a final reminder of the oasis's generosity. As you turn to rejoin the caravan, the camels begin to stir, their breaths forming small clouds in the cooling air. The caravan moves forward, the rhythm of hooves returning to the desert's pulse. The oasis recedes behind you, its green fringe shrinking until it becomes a thin line on the horizon, a memory that will stay with you like the faint imprint of a dream. The desert stretches ahead, endless and patient, ready to test you once more, yet you carry with you the quiet assurance that there are places where water still flows, where dates still ripen, and where the sound of a child's laughter can be heard even amidst the dunes. The journey continues, but the oasis remains a gentle anchor in the flow of your thoughts, a place you can return to in mind when the road feels too long. You settle back onto your camel, feeling the familiar sway of its gait, and you let the rhythm of the clip-clop settle into your breathing. The desert wind brushes against your face, carrying with it a faint scent of the oasis, date palms, cool water, and the faint, lingering incense of the mosque. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the memory of the oasis to settle like a soft blanket over the weariness of the day. In that quiet pause, you find a calm that is not the absence of movement, but the presence of a gentle, steady heartbeat that matches the pulse of the land itself. The road ahead may be long, but the oasis has taught you that even the harshest journeys are interspersed with moments of quiet grace. You breathe in, exhale, and let the desert. The leather chest at your side bears the weight of more than cloth. It carries the quiet insistence of every hand that has ever folded a bolt, every eye that has measured a length, and every whisper that has promised a future woven from silk. You lift the lid with the same measured motion you have used since you first arrived at Kashgar, the hinges sighing in a rhythm that matches the soft thud of Zafir's hooves against the sand-hardened trail. Inside, the bolts lie in orderly rows, their colors muted beneath a thin veil of dust, each hue a reminder of the distant workshops of Suzhou, where mulberry leaves have fed silkworms for generations. The Song dynasty's golden age still lingers in the sheen of the fabric, even as the world outside your caravan has shifted under the banner of the Karakhanid elite. You run a calloused finger along the edge of a bolt, feeling the faint ridges where the weaver's shuttle once slipped through the warp. The silk is cool to the touch, a subtle contrast to the heat that radiates from the desert floor. It is a quiet luxury, this fabric, that has traveled farther than any of the caravans that now line the road. You think of the looms in Suzhou, their wooden frames creaking in the night as the weaver's hands move in a rhythm as ancient as the river that once fed the city's markets. The Song court, 15 years prior, had sent thin sheets of paper to the Tangut monks you passed in Kashgar. Now the same paper bears the ink of merchants who record the weight of each bolt, the number of days since the last rain, the price of a camel's breath. A sudden, dry gust lifts a speck of sand and brushes against your cheek. You blink and the world steadies again. The caravan has been moving at a measured pace for days, the camels' breaths forming soft clouds in the early morning chill, their shadows stretching long across the dunes. The sand, ever patient, settles into the creases of your trousers, clinging like a second skin. You pull the leather strap tighter around your waist, feeling the familiar pressure of the pack against your back. The weight is no longer merely physical. It has become a ledger of expectations, a silent contract between you and the distant markets that await your arrival. You pause beside a low, weather-worn stone wall, its surface etched with the faint remnants of Brahmi characters left by Buddhist pilgrims centuries before. The carvings are half eroded, the lines softened by wind and time, yet they still speak of journeys undertaken in faith and curiosity. You run a thumb over one of the deeper grooves, tracing the ancient script as if it might reveal a secret about the burden you now bear. The irony is not lost on you. The same stone that once guided monks on pilgrimages now marks the route of a caravan whose cargo is destined for the halls of aristocrats who will never see the desert's horizon. You open the ledger that hangs from a strap at your side, its pages yellowed and frayed at the edges. The ink, dark and deliberate, records each bolt's origin, its weight, its destination. A single entry catches your eye, a missing bolt, its absence noted in a cramped margin, a tiny scar on the otherwise perfect inventory. The loss is minor in the grand ledger of trade, yet it feels like a fissure in the otherwise seamless fabric of your purpose. You wonder where it slipped away, perhaps during the hurried loading at the market square, perhaps dropped by a careless apprentice, perhaps taken by a desert fox that prowls the night with a curiosity equal to its hunger. The thought brings a faint, dry smile to your lips. The desert has a way of reminding you that nothing is ever truly lost, only rearranged. You turn to Zafir, whose massive frame stands patient beside the caravan's line of camels. The animal's eyes, dark and steady, reflect the pale light of the early sun. You adjust the rope that secures the silk to his side, feeling the roughness of the rope bite into your palm. The fibers of the rope have been frayed by years of travel, yet they hold firm, a testament to the craftsmanship of the rope makers who once supplied caravans along the Silk Road. You whisper a quiet thanks to the animal, a habit you have cultivated over countless miles. As if the camel could understand the gratitude embedded in the cadence of your voice, a distant call echoes across the dunes, a merchant from the Karakanid Khanate shouting the price of cumin. His voice carrying the faint accent of a people who have recently embraced Islam, their prayers now mingling with the ancient chants of Buddhist monks you once heard near the oasis of Kuqa. The cultural tapestry of the region is as layered as the silk you carry, each thread woven from different beliefs, languages, and histories. You recall the moment in Kashgar when a Tangut monk offered you thin sheets of paper, a novelty from the Song court, and think how those sheets now lie in the satchel of a fellow trader, perhaps used to record a prayer or a contract. The world feels both vast and intimate, each encounter a small stitch in the larger garment of your journey. You sit down on a low stone bench, its surface cool against the heat that still lingers in the sand. The bench is worn, its edges smoothed by the countless travelers who have rested upon it over the centuries. You pull a small wooden cup from your pack, fill it with water from the leather skin you refilled at the oasis, and sip slowly. The water is mineral-laden, tasting of the hidden lakes that lie beneath the Taklamakan's surface, a reminder that even in a place where water is a guarded secret, life finds a way to persist. You let the coolness travel down your throat, feeling it wash away the lingering heat of the day, a quiet cleansing that mirrors the way the desert wind sweeps away the sand after a storm. Your thoughts drift to the tale you once heard of a merchant whose entire shipment was lost to a sudden flood of the Tarim River. The story had been told in a hushed tone around a fire in a caravanserai, the merchant's ledger forever marked by a blank space where the silk should have been. He survived, they said, but his ledger never quite recovered. The anecdote hangs in the air like a faint perfume, a reminder that the desert can be both generous and capricious. You find a small, dry chuckle in the memory, an ironic acknowledgement that the very river that sustains life can also claim it, just as the desert's silence can be both a balm and a void. You rise, the sand shifting beneath your feet, and begin the final check of the inventory. Each bolt is lifted, examined, and placed back onto the camel's side with deliberate care. The silk rustles softly, a whisper that seems to echo the distant prayers of monks and the call to prayer of the Karakanid faithful alike. You notice the way the light catches the edges of the fabric, turning the reds into deep garnets, the blues into twilight hues, the yellows into the soft glow of sunrise. The colors, once mere commodities, now feel like living things, each hue carrying a fragment of the world you have traversed. A fellow driver, his beard dusted with the same fine sand that clings to your own, leans against a wooden post and offers a quiet joke. If only the sand were as soft as the silk we carry. His voice is low, the humor dry, the laugh that follows rolling like distant thunder across the dunes. The moment is brief, but it settles into your mind like a gentle drumbeat, a reminder that even in the weight of responsibility, there is room for a lightness of spirit. You return his smile, a faint upturn of your lips, acknowledging the shared humanity that binds all who travel these ancient routes. The sun climbs higher, its light sharpening the shadows cast by the camels and the caravan's wagons. The heat settles into the stone walls of the caravanserai you will soon reach, the air thickening with the scent of incense and the faint aroma of spiced tea. You pause, taking a deep breath, feeling the desert's breath mingle with your own. The wind, now a gentle sigh, brushes past the dunes, carrying with it the distant echo of a pipa's strings, a melody that seems to rise from the very sand itself. You close the ledger, its pages now aligned, the missing bolt noted but not mourned. The caravan moves forward, the rhythm of hooves a steady metronome that steadies your thoughts. The burden of silk, once a heavy load, now feels like a quiet companion, its presence a reminder of the journeys that have come before and those that lie ahead. You settle back onto the bench, eyes closing briefly as the sun's warmth settles into your bones, and you allow the calm that has settled over the desert to seep into you, like a soft blanket. The stone caravanserai rises from the plateau like a tired sentinel, its walls a patchwork of weather-worn bricks and the occasional slab of reclaimed marble that still bears the faint imprint of a forgotten imperial seal. You step through the heavy wooden door, the hinges sighing in a rhythm that matches the low murmur of the wind outside, and the cool shade inside greets you like a soft exhale after a long climb. The courtyard beyond is a shallow basin of packed earth, its surface smoothed by the countless feet of travelers who have paused here over the centuries, each leaving a faint imprint that the desert wind has long since erased. A thin column of smoke curls lazily from the central hearth, its pale tendrils winding around the arches as if seeking a place to rest. The fire itself crackles with a steady, unhurried pop, sending up occasional sparks that flicker like distant stars before they are swallowed by the night. The scent of burning juniper mingles with the faint, lingering perfume of incense that once drifted from a nearby shrine, a reminder that this place has served both the weary merchant and the devout pilgrim. You notice a small, cracked tile near the hearth, its glaze faded to a muted teal, the kind of detail that once would have been a point of pride for the artisans of the Tang dynasty, now simply a quiet testament to time's patient hand. Your assigned room lies just beyond a narrow passageway, the stone walls narrowing as they guide you toward a modest chamber. The doorway is framed by a simple wooden lintel, its surface scarred by the occasional nail and the occasional hand that has leaned against it for support. Inside, the ceiling slopes low, the beams above you darkened by centuries of smoke and the occasional drizzle of rain that has seeped through the cracks in the roof. The space is barely large enough for a thin woven mat, a small wooden chest, and the faint outline of a lamp that hangs from a hook near the wall, its iron loop rusted but still functional. You set your pack down with a soft thud, the leather chest sighing as it settles onto the packed earth floor. The hinges of the chest creak in a familiar, almost comforting cadence, echoing the sound of the old wooden door that opened to the market street in Kashgar. You unfasten the straps that hold the silk bolts, allowing the cloth to unfurl slightly, the colors catching the dim light and revealing the subtle sheen that only a well-kept piece of silk can possess. The fabric feels cool to the touch, a stark contrast to the warm, dry air that clings to the courtyard outside. You run a finger along the edge of a bolt, feeling the fine weave, and a quiet thought passes through you. The same threads that once draped the halls of Guangzhou now rest in this humble room, far from the bustling ports, yet still bearing the same quiet dignity. A soft knock at the wooden door interrupts your contemplation. The caravanserai steward, a man whose beard is flecked with the gray of many desert seasons, steps inside. His eyes are bright despite the weariness that settles in the lines of his face, and his hands are calloused from years of opening and closing doors for strangers. He offers you a bowl of thick yogurt, the surface speckled with a thin layer of oil that glints in the lamplight. The yogurt is cool, its tangy flavor cutting through the dryness that has settled in your throat after hours of travel. You take a small spoonful, feeling the creamy texture coat your tongue, and a faint smile lifts the corners of your mouth. The simplicity of the offering feels almost ceremonial, a small ritual that marks the transition from the road to rest. You set the bowl on a low wooden table, its surface scarred by countless meals and the occasional spill of oil or wine. The table is sturdy, its legs slightly uneven, a reminder that even the most functional objects in this place have stories etched into their grain. As you eat, the distant clatter of a pot being set down on a fire elsewhere in the courtyard reaches your ears, a muted percussion that blends with the occasional hoot of an owl perched on the outer wall. The night outside deepens, the sky a velvety black that seems to press against the stone, and the wind outside sighs through the narrow gaps in the walls, a soft rustle that resembles the whisper of a prayer. The steward, after ensuring you have enough to eat, steps back into the shadows of the courtyard. You watch his silhouette recede, his figure merging with the dim glow of lanterns that hang from the arches, each lantern casting a warm, amber circle on the stone floor. The light flickers gently, as if breathing, and you notice how the shadows dance across the walls, forming fleeting patterns that remind you of the intricate murals that once adorned the caves of Dunhuang, now far behind you but still present in memory. You rise from the mat and move to the small window that looks out over the courtyard. The stone frame is rough, the glass panes missing, leaving only a lattice of iron bars that filter the night air. Through the bars you can see the silhouettes of other travelers, some seated on the ground, others leaning against the walls, each lost in their own quiet thoughts. A caravan guard, his turban wrapped tightly against the chill, stands watch near the entrance, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. The guard's presence is a silent reassurance, a reminder that even in these remote outposts, order is maintained, albeit with a weary patience that mirrors the desert's own slow rhythm. You step back inside, the coolness of the room wrapping around you like a thin shawl. The lamp above the hook sputters slightly, its flame wavering as if contemplating whether to stay alight or surrender to the darkness. You reach up and adjust the wick, the small act feeling almost meditative, the motion steady and deliberate. The flame steadies, casting a steadier glow that illuminates the room's modest furnishings. The wooden chest, now open, reveals a small bundle of dried figs and a handful of almonds, their skins cracked but still fragrant. You take a fig, its sweetness a quiet contrast to the sourness of the yogurt, and let the taste linger, a small pleasure that seems to echo the larger journey's purpose. A faint creak comes from the doorway as another traveler enters, a woman wrapped in a faded indigo shawl, her face partially hidden by a veil that has seen many suns rise and set. She carries a small satchel, its leather worn smooth by the weight of countless journeys. She offers you a cup of tea, the steam rising in thin, curling ribbons that disappear into the air as quickly as they appear. The tea is light, its flavor delicate, a hint of jasmine lingering at the back of your palate. You accept the cup, feeling the warmth seep into your hands, and you both share a brief, wordless exchange. A nod, a smile, an acknowledgement of the shared path that has brought you to this quiet corner of the world. The conversation, though minimal, carries an undercurrent of camaraderie that feels as ancient as the caravanserai itself. You both understand the language of the road, the rhythm of the camel's steps, the sigh of the wind across dunes, the soft clink of coins in a pouch. You notice the woman's satchel contains a small, intricately carved wooden box, its surface etched with a pattern reminiscent of the lotus motifs that once adorned the silk bolts you carry. She opens it to reveal a handful of dried rose petals, their scent faint but unmistakable, a reminder of the gardens that once flourished along the Silk Road's more fertile stretches. She offers one to you, and you accept, feeling the petals' brittle texture crumble between your fingers, releasing a whisper of fragrance that seems to linger in the air longer than it should. The night deepens further, and the courtyard outside grows quieter. The fire's crackle softens, the sparks now few and far between, each one a tiny ember that fades into the darkness. The wind outside has settled into a gentle murmur, a low hum that brushes against the stone walls like a distant chant. Inside, the lamp's flame continues to burn, a small, steadfast beacon in the otherwise muted space. You settle back onto the mat, the woven fibers cool against your skin, and you allow your thoughts to drift, as if carried by the same gentle breeze that now whispers through the courtyard. You think of the road ahead, of the dunes that will soon give way to the cliffs of Dunhuang, of the libraries that hold scrolls and stories waiting to be read. You think of the silk bolts that rest in your chest, each one a thread that ties together the distant workshops of Guangzhou, the bustling markets of Kashgar, and the quiet stone walls of this caravanserai. You recall the merchant from Karakhanid who haggled over cumin, the Tangut monk who offered thin sheets of paper, the young apprentice who scattered barley, each a small note in the larger symphony of the journey. A soft rustle comes from the doorway as the steward returns, his lantern now dimmer, the oil having been used sparingly. He offers a final cup of warm water, its surface still, its purpose simple, to soothe a throat that has spoken little today. You accept, feeling the liquid's heat spread through you, a gentle reminder that even the smallest gestures can carry great comfort. The steward bows his head slightly, a gesture of respect that feels both ancient and immediate, and then steps back into the shadows, his silhouette merging once more with the night. The lamp above the hook flickers once more, then steadies, casting a warm circle of light that seems to hold the room together, as if the very walls were breathing in time with the flame. You lie back, the mat supporting you, the stone beneath you cool and steady. The hum of the distant wind, the occasional creak of a wooden beam, the faint echo of a far-off prayer from a traveler's lips, all blend into a single, soothing cadence. Your breath matches the rhythm of the fire, slow and even, each inhalation drawing in the scent of smoke and incense, each exhalation releasing the day's fatigue into the quiet night. In this moment, the caravanserai feels less like a waypoint and more like a sanctuary, a place where the road pauses, where the endless march of sand and sky yields to a brief, gentle stillness. The stone walls, the flickering lamp, the soft murmur of distant voices, all conspire to create a lullaby that cradles you, inviting you to let go of the weight of the silk, the concerns of the journey, and simply be present in the calm that settles around you like a warm, familiar blanket. The night stretches on, unhurried, and you allow yourself to drift. The quiet of the stones. The sun has already begun its slow descent, pulling the horizon into a wash of amber that seems to linger on the edge of the dunes before surrendering to the night. You feel the heat of the day still clinging to the sand, a faint afterglow that makes the air shimmer like a thin veil of breath. Ahead, the cliffs of Dunhuang rise in a jagged silhouette, their stone faces darkening as the light retreats, each crevice and ledge a silent witness to centuries of travelers who have passed this point with hopes, fears, and the weight of their own cargoes. Your camel, Zafir, shifts his massive frame beneath you, the soft thud of his hooves on the compacted sand, a steady metronome that matches the rhythm of your own breathing. The animal's breath is warm, a faint plume that disappears into the cooling air, and you can hear the faint rustle of his harness as the leather straps settle into place. The rope that binds you to him is frayed at the ends, the same rope that has pulled caravans across the Central Asian steppe since the 9th century, its fibers worn smooth by countless journeys. You run a thumb along the rope, feeling the grooves carved by time, and a quiet thought passes through you. The desert does not forget, it merely reshapes. The caravan trails behind you in a loose line, a procession of camels and men whose faces are etched with the same mixture of fatigue and resolve that you carry. The driver ahead, a man whose name you have never learned, lifts his hand in a brief, practiced gesture that signals a pause. The other camels lower their heads, the clatter of their harnesses softening to a murmur. You hear the faint creak of a wooden cart wheel turning over a small stone, a sound that seems out of place amid the endless sand, yet somehow fitting, an echo of the ancient trade routes that once carried jade, spices, and paper across the same ground. Your eyes linger on the cliffs, their sheer faces scarred by the passage of time. Carved into the rock are the remnants of Buddhist murals, the faded pigments of the caves of the 1,000 Buddhas that have survived the rise of the Western Xia and the later Mongol incursions. The colors are muted now, the once vivid reds and golds softened by centuries of wind and sand, but the outlines of the figures remain, their serene expressions a reminder that faith has often been the compass for those who travel these barren expanses. You recall the stories you heard in Kashgar, whispered by a monk from the Tangut kingdom, about how silk was once used to drape the statues within these caves, a testament to the intertwining of commerce and devotion. A gentle breeze lifts a few stray grains of sand, swirling them around your boots and settling them on the worn leather of your satchel. The satchel itself is battered, its leather cracked in places, the brass buckles dulled by the sun. Inside, the silk bolts are folded with care, each one a whisper of distant Guangzhou workshops where mulberry leaves fed silkworms for generations. The silk feels cool to the touch, its surface smooth yet bearing the faint imprint of the weaver's hands, a tactile memory of the Song dynasty's golden age. You run a finger along the edge of a bolt, feeling the slight unevenness where a thread has frayed, a small imperfection that seems insignificant against the vastness of the desert. Yet it is a reminder that even the most prized goods bear the marks of their journey. Your mind drifts to the brass coin you keep in a small leather pouch, a Song-era piece minted under the reign of Emperor Renzong, its round face catching the last sliver of sunlight. The coin's surface is warm, the metal slightly tarnished, but the inscription remains legible, a silent testament to the far-off markets you will eventually reach. You flip it between your thumb and forefinger, watching it spin lazily before it settles back into the pouch. The act feels ritualistic, a small meditation that grounds you amid the endless expanse. It is ironic, you think, that a piece of metal forged in a distant capital now serves as a talisman for a caravan that traverses a land where metal is scarce, and the only true wealth is water. The air grows cooler as the sun sinks lower, and the shadows lengthen across the dunes, turning the sand into a sea of deep ochre. A distant call of a desert bird pierces the quiet, its plaintive cry echoing off the cliffs and fading into the night. The sound is both lonely and comforting, a reminder that life persists even in the harshest of places. You hear the soft murmur of your companions, a low conversation about the next market, about the price of spices, about the thin line between profit and loss. Their voices are muted, as if the desert itself has pressed a finger to their lips, urging them to speak only what is necessary. You pause, allowing the moment to settle around you like a thin veil of smoke. The desert, with its endless dunes and stark horizons, has a way of making time feel both stretched and compressed. Hours can pass in a single breath, and a single breath can feel like an eternity. The weight of the silk in your pack seems to shift, not because it has grown heavier, but because the journey has added layers of meaning to each bolt. Each piece of cloth now carries the hopes of the weavers, the ambitions of the merchants, the prayers of the monks, and the quiet endurance of the camels that bear them. A faint rustle catches your attention. A small group of children, their faces smudged with dust, dart between the date palms that fringe the oasis near Kuqa, a memory that flits through your mind like a fleeting breeze. Their laughter, though distant, reaches you as a soft ripple across the stillness, a reminder that even in places where the desert dominates, life finds a way to bloom. You smile, thin-lipped, at the thought of their carefree steps, and wonder how many of them will one day follow the same routes you have, carrying silk, spices, or perhaps something entirely different. The caravan begins to move again, the driver ahead giving a subtle nod that signals the resumption of travel. Zafir lifts his head, ears pricking at the sound, and the soft clatter of harnesses resumes. The camel's hooves sink into the sand with a muted thud, each step a small echo that fades quickly, swallowed by the vastness around you. The rhythm is hypnotic, a steady beat that steadies your thoughts as the cliffs loom ever closer. You feel the subtle shift in the air, the way the temperature drops a degree with each passing moment, and you pull the thin woolen shawl around your shoulders, its fibers warm and familiar against your skin. As you draw nearer to the city, the faint glow of lanterns becomes visible, flickering like fireflies against the darkening sky. The scent of incense drifts on the wind, mingling with the dry mineral tang of the desert. It is a scent that carries both the promise of civilization and the memory of prayer, a reminder that the Silk Road has always been a conduit not just for goods, but for ideas, faith, and culture. You think of the monks you have passed, their chants echoing off stone walls, and of the merchants who have traded not only silk but also stories, each exchange a thread in the tapestry of history. Your thoughts settle on the notion of arrival. The city of Dunhuang, with its bustling market and famed libraries, has been a destination for many before you, a place where silk meets paper, where caravans pause to rest, where scholars gather to copy and translate. The anticipation is not a fevered rush but a gentle tide, a quiet recognition that the long, dusty road is drawing to a close. You feel a subtle smile tug at the corners of your mouth, amused by the thought that after weeks of hardship, the destination is a city known for its tea houses and the soft rustle of parchment. The final stretch feels less like a trial and more like a quiet resolution. The dunes, which have seemed endless moments ago, now recede into the background, their silhouettes softened by the growing night. The rhythmic sway of the camels, the steady clip-clop of hooves, the low murmur of the caravan, all blend into a single, soothing cadence that lulls you toward a sense of calm. You inhale the cool desert air, feeling it fill your lungs, and exhale slowly, letting the breath carry away the fatigue of the journey. The cliffs of Dunhuang stand before you now, their stone faces illuminated by the soft glow of torches set in the walls of the city's outer gate. The entrance is a modest arch, its wooden doors reinforced with iron bands, the same kind of construction you have seen in caravanserais along the route. As you step through, the stone beneath your boots feels cooler, a subtle contrast to the warm sand you have left behind. The city's sounds greet you, a distant call to prayer, the clink of bronze coins in a merchant's pouch, the soft chatter of market stalls. The world feels both larger and more intimate, as if the desert has opened a doorway to a new, quieter realm. You pause at the threshold, allowing the moment to settle. The journey has been long, the silk heavy, the desert relentless, yet the quiet resolve that has guided you remains steady. The cliffs, the dunes, the caravans, the whispers of monks and merchants, all have woven themselves into the fabric of your own story, a tapestry as delicate and enduring as the silk you carry. You take a final, lingering breath, feeling the night's peace settle around you like a warm, familiar blanket. The gate of Dunhuang looms ahead, its wooden beams darkened by countless seasons, the iron hinges still bearing the faint rust of desert wind. You pause a moment before stepping through, feeling the weight of the day settle into the soles of your boots as if the stone itself were measuring the miles you have covered. The sky is a muted violet, the last sliver of sun slipping behind the jagged cliffs that have watched caravans pass for centuries. A thin veil of dust hangs in the air, catching the faint glow of lanterns that begin to stir awake along the market street, their amber light spilling like warm honey onto the worn cobbles. The first lantern you pass is hung from a low wooden beam, its paper shade mottled with age, the flame within flickering with a steadiness that seems to echo the rhythm of your own heartbeat. The scent of oil mingles with the lingering perfume of incense that drifts from a nearby shrine, a reminder that the city, though bustling, still clings to the quiet prayers of monks who once inscribed sutras on the very cliffs you now see. You notice a small brass plaque near the lantern, its inscription in the elegant script of the Song Court, a relic of the trade routes that once carried scholars and silk alike across these sands. The plaque bears the date of a reign long past, yet its presence feels as immediate as the breath you draw, a quiet testament to the layers of history that settle like dust on every surface. Your steps carry you onto the main thoroughfare, where the market has already begun to pulse with life. Vendors line the street, their stalls draped with faded awnings of woven reed, each one a miniature world of color and sound. A woman in a deep indigo robe arranges bundles of dried apricots, their skins cracked and sun-kissed, the sweet scent rising like a memory of distant orchards. Beside her, a young man with a shaved head shouts the price of copper bells, his voice low but steady, the tone of someone who has learned that raising one's voice too high only draws the attention of the city guard. You smile thin-lipped at the scene, the irony of a market that never truly sleeps, its stalls open before the sun, its lights still burning after the moon has risen. Yet the rhythm remains unbroken, as reliable as the camel's tread on the Dunze caravan of donkeys pulls a cart laden with spices. The air around it is thick with the sharp perfume of cumin, the earthy warmth of cinnamon, and the faint, almost metallic tang of pepper. The spices are packed in small earthenware jars, each sealed with a thin layer of wax that has cracked over the journey, exposing the vivid powders within. You recall the first time you saw such a display in Kashgar, the way the colors seemed to dance under the market's lanterns, and you feel a quiet continuity, as if the spices have traveled with you across the desert. They're sent a thread that ties the cities together. You make your way toward the central courtyard of the market, where a low stone fountain murmurs softly, its water catching the lantern light and scattering it in 1,000 tiny reflections. The fountain's basin is lined with smooth pebbles, worn by the hands of countless travelers who have paused here to wash their faces, to drink, to rest a moment from the endless road. A group of children gathers at its edge, their laughter a soft ripple that rises above the murmur of merchants. One of them, a boy with a scar on his cheek, tosses a pebble into the water, watching the ripples spread outward, his eyes bright with the simple wonder that never seems to fade, even in a city that has seen empires rise and fall. Your own cargo, the bolts of silk, rests now on a sturdy wooden pallet near a stall that sells fine fabrics. The silk is a cascade of colors, crimson like fresh blood, jade green like the first shoots of spring, a deep indigo that mirrors the night sky you have just left behind. Each bolt is carefully rolled, the edges bound with thin strips of rawhide, the fibers still humming with the memory of the mulberry leaves that fed the silkworms in the distant workshops of Guangzhou. The merchant who owns the stall, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that have seen more caravans than you have, greets you with a nod. He lifts a bolt and holds it up to the lantern light, the fabric catching the glow and seeming to breathe. "These will fetch a good price in the capital," he says, his voice low, the words carrying the weight of trade agreements and the subtle politics of the Karakhanid elite who now dominate the region. You notice the faint imprint of a Song-era coin on the fabric's edge, a tiny reminder that the silk's journey began under a different banner, a different set of rulers. And now it rests in a city where the new order has already begun to stitch its own patterns. A familiar face appears from the crowd, a fellow caravan member, the driver who has guided Zafir through the dunes, his hands still calloused from the rains. His eyes still bearing the quiet patience of someone who has learned to read the desert's moods. He carries a simple bowl of roasted barley, the grains darkened by the fire, the aroma earthy and comforting. He offers it to you without fanfare, the gesture as natural as the passing of a cup of tea. You accept, feeling the warm bowl against your palm, the heat seeping through the thin leather of your gloves. The barley is dry, each bite a reminder of the long days spent on the road, the way the desert has taught you to find sustenance in the smallest of things. You share a brief laugh, the sound low and almost swallowed by the surrounding chatter, an unspoken acknowledgement that the journey has been arduous, yet the end is now within sight. You settle onto a low stone bench that runs along the edge of the courtyard, the stone cool beneath your fingertips, the surface worn smooth by the countless travelers who have rested here before you. The bench faces a narrow alley that leads to a tea house, its wooden sign swinging gently in the evening breeze. The tea house is a modest structure, its interior lit by a single lantern that casts a soft glow over low tables and cushions. The scent of tea leaves, freshly steeped, drifts out onto the street, a fragrant veil that seems to soften the harshness of the desert's memory. You watch as a group of scholars, their robes dyed in muted earth tones, settle at a table, their scrolls spread before them, the ink still wet from recent writing. Their quiet discussion about poetry and philosophy drifts toward you, the words barely audible, yet you can sense the reverence they hold for the ancient roots that have carried not only goods, but ideas across the vast expanse. The night deepens, and the lanterns flicker in a gentle, almost hypnotic rhythm. The market sounds soften, the clatter of carts, the shouts of vendors, the laughter of children, all blend into a low hum that feels like a lullaby for the weary traveler. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the sounds to wash over you, the cool night air brushing against your face, the distant call to prayer from a minaret echoing faintly, its cadence a reminder of the shifting spiritual landscape that now threads through the region. The call is not the same as the one you heard in Kashgar, yet it carries a similar solemnity, a quiet invitation to pause and reflect. Your thoughts drift back to the desert, to the endless dunes that have become a part of you, their grains embedded in the soles of your boots, in the fibers of your cloak. You recall the sandstorm at noon, the way the wind had howled like a chorus of angry spirits, the way Zafir had stood steadfast, his eyes half closed, his breath shallow. You remember the oasis at Kuqa, the cool water that tasted of mineral and memory, the dates offered by the older woman whose smile seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Those moments, once sharp and vivid, now blur into a soft tapestry, each thread woven into the fabric of your journey, each memory a quiet stitch that holds the whole together. A soft rustle draws your attention to a corner of the courtyard, where a small group of musicians have gathered. A lone pipa rests against a low table, its strings glinting in the lantern light. A young woman lifts the instrument, her fingers moving with practiced grace, the notes rising like a gentle breeze over the dunes. The melody is simple, a repetitive pattern that settles into your mind, its cadence mirroring the steady clip-clop of hooves you have grown accustomed to. The music does not demand attention. It simply exists, a quiet companion to the night, a reminder that even in places where trade and commerce dominate, art finds a way to whisper its presence. You rise from the bench, the stone cool against your calves, and make your way back toward the stall where your silk is displayed. The merchant has already begun to bundle the bolts, preparing them for transport to the city's warehouses. He looks up as you approach, his expression a mixture of fatigue and quiet satisfaction. "The road has been kind to you," he says, his voice low, the words carrying a subtle irony that the desert, which can be both cruel and generous, has allowed you to reach this point. You nod, feeling the weight of his observation settle like a soft blanket over your shoulders. Outside, the night sky has deepened, the stars now a dense tapestry of light, each point a silent witness to the countless journeys that have crossed this land. The moon, a thin crescent, hangs low, its pale glow reflecting off the polished brass of the song coins you have carried, the metal catching the light and shimmering like a distant promise. You pause, looking up, letting the quiet of the heavens fill you, the vastness reminding you of the smallness of your own path, yet also of the significance of each step you have taken. You turn back toward the market, your steps measured, your breath even. The lanterns continue to sway, their light steady, the markets hum a constant undercurrent. You feel the calm settle deeper, a quiet acceptance that the journey, with all its hardships and fleeting joys, has reached its gentle conclusion. The silk will find new hands, new eyes, new stories to be woven, and you too will carry the memory of the dunes, the desert sigh, and the soft glow of lanterns back into the folds of your own life. As the last ember of the fire in the courtyard dims, you close your eyes once more, inhaling the cool night air, feeling the distant echo of a camel's low hum. The faint rustle of silk and the steady, comforting rhythm of your own heartbeat. You breathe out